morning. Welcome back to the broadcast. You're watching New Day Kenya, and I thank you for your time and contributions here on the broadcast. The hashtag on Twitter is New Day KE, and the WhatsApp number is displayed on the bottom end of your screens. And 22,000 schools get grade 5 books ahead of the first term, which is reopening today on the 26th. Learning institutions evade Education Ministry's fee directives with new schemes, according to the Daily Nation. And schools and suppliers now use uniforms to exploit parents who have decried the move by learning institutions to do so. And Form 1 and 3 learners have been asked to pay retailers exorbitant prices for items way above the market rates in the country. And most of the affected learners yesterday have decried the move and rather have called upon the Ministry of Education to intervene. And Wakili Philip Mwangala joins me for that discussion. He's an advocate of the High Court and commentator on governance and political development. Wakili, thank you. Your time is all appreciated. And shortly we'll be joined by the former Deputy Speaker of the National Assembly, Honorable Farah Maalim. Now, in regards to, of course, the pandemic, which necessitated massive layoffs because of the impact it has had on the economy since March 2020, and schools reopening now, parents, of course, feeling the pinch of the pandemic. And again, now this cropping up as a concern among parents of the exorbitance in terms of the prices of the items, which are way above the market rates in the country. How important is it for the Ministry of Education to take note of this as the schools reopen today?
Thank you for having me. Our education, or the cost of education in this country is very high. We have had instances where I think the political class have claimed that we have children enjoying free primary and free secondary education. But that is not true. The only thing we have is subsidized education, because parents are still paying a part of the school fees. And in some quarters, it may be considered a negligible amount, but that very negligible amount is very huge to very many families across this country. And I was just seeing a story before we got on of a governor who is giving bursaries to so many children. And that means that a parent who is supposed to pay, I think they're supposed to pay 9,000 shillings for day secondary schools. That parent cannot afford 9,000 shillings annually for their child to go to school. And that is very unfortunate. Number two, when it comes to the exploitation of parents by heads of schools, because heads of schools are in charge of the budgeting, the accounting, and the auditing, and everything that concerns management of money in our schools, both in primary and secondary schools. The Ministry of Education has done very little to control what heads of schools demand from parents. You have instances where you have parents who are forced to, buy school buses, build infrastructure within schools, yet they are not in a position to do so. You have heads of schools, and this happens mostly in high schools or secondary schools, heads of schools who hike school fees, and they can go as high as 70,000. Yet the ministry has a cap of, I think it's in the region of 50 to 55,000 per student per year. So it's very important that the Ministry of Education looks at capping totally, and not just for certain categories of schools, because you would go to national schools and it's like they have been given a free hand. You'd go to the provincial schools, what we used to know as provincial schools, and they also have a certain leeway to increase school fees and other levies on parents. The other bit that is also unfortunate is...
Okay, then that leeway you have mentioned as you proceed, in terms of then, setting a price of the school fees, which is the tuition here in particular, then who accounts for that in terms of the audit and how this money is perhaps put into use and maximized?
I think what has been happening is, yes, you would be given a fee structure, and I've seen this with so many students. You are given a fee structure that reads the government cap, the Ministry of Education cap. But then there are some vote heads that are miscellaneous. You have a vote head on, non-government employees, support staff, or staff that have been employed by the board. You have a vote head on building a dormitory. You have a vote head on books. You have a vote head on so many things. So when you accumulate that amount on top of the amount of money that parents are supposed to pay for school fees, it just goes way above. And that's what I'm saying. The Ministry of Education really needs to exercise control, because public schools are within the complete ambit of the Ministry of Education. So giving heads of schools that leeway is injuring the parent. Yes, there's some parents who have no problem, by the way, paying these amounts of money, but we must look at equality across board. I was also going to mention that we have this scenario, and you have mentioned it, where certain schools insist that a parent must buy uniform from a certain supplier, books from a certain supplier. And this has been going on for the longest time. When I was in school, by the way, we had instances where some schools will insist that you must buy their uniforms from certain quarters, and then I think they have some kickbacks or whatever. So this is also something that the Ministry of Education must come hard on. I think there has been a laxity, and I would really blame it on the leadership at the ministry, because there was a time when those different tiers of quality and audit control existed. You had the district education officers who would, visit these schools and make sure that all these regulations were being followed to the letter. So the Ministry of Education needs to do more. I think they need to spread their arms across the country.
Okay. As you mentioned that yesterday, the Sunday Nation did an analysis on page 2 and 3 of the publication, and the headline, "Why We Might Not Join Form 1, Pupils Locked Out Because of Fee." And you look at the pictured students here, they are about 15 in number. There are many more according to the paper, and the average marks they scored in the Kenya Certificate of Primary Education, KCPE, is 350 because of biting poverty, sickness, and a host of hurdles stand in the way of such learners who have bright future, but they cannot join secondary schools for secondary education because of school fees. I mean, then how does the government look into this? I mean, in terms of coming up with interventions to help such brains who have a bright future, but then again, they look at what's before them and it's a bleak one.
There was, when we had the Constituency Development Fund, beginning from 2002 onwards, we had the idea of bursaries. Then, when this was starting, and especially after the free primary education by Mwai Kibaki, it was a good idea. The bursaries were really helping out. People would get bursaries from Form 1 to Form 4 in secondary schools. But then it got to a point when the transition between or from primary school to secondary school increased, you had more students. And that meant that the demographic that was needy also increased. And you had instances where the constituency could only give a bursary of about 3,000 per student, or even less. I've heard stories of people receiving 1,500 shillings. That cannot really help matters. So for me, bursaries will not be the answer, because the number of needy students we are having across this country has increased exponentially. What would be the solution is for the government to go towards complete free basic education. And that means primary school should be free, secondary school also should be free, purely free, not just subsidies. I think you remember when Uhuru Kenyatta and Raila Odinga were campaigning in 2017. Both of them, in fact, were insisting that secondary school education will be free, when what they actually meant was that it will be subsidized. So for me, the key thing that we must look at is the cost of education. It is too high. If we must handle these issues, if we must make sure that we have equality, we must look at free education, both in primary and secondary school, because we'll not then be having instances where you have very bright students failing to join secondary school because they cannot pay even the minimum that the government requires them to add on to the subsidy. The other bit that would be very important, and I have held this thought for a while, that previously, and this began right from the 60s and 70s, the notion of national schools, provincial schools, that categorization. We got to a point where national schools were very few, and people were clamoring for their children to actually attend, the top schools. And we forgot about those neighborhood schools. We forgot about those local schools. So we must really begin to equip the local school right in the neighborhood, because some of these students are looking to go cross over several counties to go study in a secondary school, not even a university.
Okay.
So we must look at making sure that we are increasing the infrastructure in our schools. We are increasing the quality of these local schools. It's unfortunate that in our whole sub-county, you do not have, or you'd have students clamoring to go outside a county to study in high school. I mean, that really beats sense in this age. So we must really make sure that we are increasing that infrastructure, we are increasing the capacity of our institutions.
Okay, that mentioned, and then as the first term of 2021 opens today for learning institutions across the country and learners equally, there has been the pandemic, and we have seen how it's rather shattered all spheres of life, including the economy, the political arena, and also the social aspects of the society. Is there a worthwhile lesson that the government and authorities can take from the pandemic to perhaps set up our institutions in terms of better equipment, infrastructure, and the capacity? Because without classrooms, then if we had enough classrooms that are properly ventilated in terms of spacing, then learning would continue in 2020. But that never happened because of the close proximity of learners across institutions in the country. Is there something that the government can take out from the year that was rather ravaged by COVID-19?
There is a lot that the government should have learned. I'm using that deliberately because it is not it is not automatic that they will actually pick these lessons. But one of the things that you have mentioned, and rightfully so, is that we ought to look at the infrastructure. Classrooms. We have classes across this country that have, a small space that occupies 50 children. And then look at also the physical capacity. You have teachers who, the number is very limited. The ratio of teachers to students is not ideal. So we must first look at infrastructure in the name of classrooms. We must look at infrastructure in the name of even desks. That is very basic. And we had an opportunity. For me, during the time when schools were actually being closed, for me, I would have loved to see a government that was intent on addressing these systemic deficits. We had some rhetoric going around where the president, you remember saying they were going to commission certain local carpenters to make
the
desks which I was informed did not happen. There were people who were complaining, and additional classrooms. I'll give an example of Rwanda. At the height of the pandemic, Rwanda built, I think, double the number of classrooms they actually had. And Rwanda compared to Kenya, I mean, you cannot even compare the GDP of the two countries. So it just takes very deliberate leadership to address these issues. So we must also look at capacity in terms of teachers. Because if personnel is lacking, if you have that kind of deficit, then the quality of education is also will also be an issue. So that infrastructure, we must also look at capacity. We must also look at costing. That we must also address because the cost of education keeps rising. When you're looking at the cost of items, it's not just the cost of food that is going up. We are looking at the cost of books. We are looking at the cost of uniform. So these three items ought to have been considered by the government now. But we have seen that they are not giving that ultimate consideration. So we pray that the government that is coming in next year will be able to address these issues going forward. Because these systemic issues have been there for a long time. It has taken decades for us to get to a position where you have 50 pupils and students in a small, tiny classroom. Right. Or you have a school that does not have sanitary facilities or classrooms that, meet the standard. Okay. So the government ought to, and I would be very cautious about advising this government. I would really be putting my hopes on the government that is coming next in 2022. Okay,
let's now take a look at this because we also seek to do a highlight of the publications in the next few minutes and also take the account of the former Deputy Speaker of the National Assembly, Honorable Farah Maalim. And given what has been happening, there is also concern amongst tutors in the country in terms of the collective bargaining agreement 2021-2026. And they signed the agreement whilst appreciating that the content of the agreement is not rather satisfying or is not efficient in terms of the better pay that they had actually thought that they would get from the government. How would this affect perhaps the rollout of the competency-based curriculum in the country, which the government sees as perhaps the way out in terms of addressing some of the deficiencies that we have in our schools?
It's very important to note that these issues about CBAs, and especially with teachers, began quite a while back. And during the Moi government's time, it was used as a bait. I mean, you are clamoring for an increase in your salary, and then you're given a promise, and that promise is not kept. And increasingly, there was a pile-up of these promises. And we have seen the same thing going on, even with this government, where these CBAs are not honored. And the teachers, it's just across board, but the teachers especially have been given a raw deal. For me, again, it goes back to our expenditure and how we determine what goes where. Because it's very possible, given the taxes that the government collects, the revenues that the government collects, it's very possible to pay the teachers what is required for them to be paid. Because when you're looking at quality of education, you must also look at a satisfied teacher. Mm-hmm. I have been a teacher myself for a while, and I can tell you that if you are not being remunerated accordingly, morale goes down. It's just automatic that it has to go down. So the government must really ensure that they are meeting not the demands, but the requirements of having a teacher who has the best morale and having a teacher who is keen on delivering quality education, even as we're looking at the competency-based curriculum.
Okay, Honorable Farah Malem, good morning.
Good morning to you.
And thank you for joining us. Schools are reopening across the country. A year ravaged by the pandemic, the shutdown of learning institutions, and of course the other spheres of life that was affected because of the pandemic, and their concerns that parents have recorded or decried that schools are exploiting parents in terms of a hike in the price of school uniforms and other stationeries that are meant for learners who are resuming learning institutions today. What's your account of this? Has the government come up with enabling measures to perhaps intervene and address such problems across learning institutions in the country?
To begin with, ordinarily in any civilized society, teachers are supposed to be, or learning institutions are supposed to be the areas in which a government makes the maximum investments in. And I think in the first few years of our independence, that was probably, that was taken into consideration in a big way. The first Kenyatta government had allocated a lot of funds for education. And that's why the trinity of those days, with which they said ujinga,
ignorance, poverty
and education. But education was coming fast at that time because ignorance is there. Ignorance, and poverty, and what was the third one?
Ignorance, poverty, and education.
Disease.
I mean, disease.
And disease,
yeah.
You're right, your disease, yes. Now,
ugonjwa umaskini
na ujinga. Yeah. Sasa, if you look at today and look at the salary remunerations of a country like Japan, teachers get paid better than doctors. Teachers get paid better than doctors. The top of the top are the ones who opt to teach. South Korea is the same. I was in South Korea way back when I had done some postgraduate program, and I had a stint there at one of the top schools there. In our case here, the three areas that are best paid in any developing or developed world are the teaching, the health, and the law and order, the policemen. To be employed as a policeman right now in the US is something that everybody yearns to be done. To be a nurse in UK right now, or anywhere else in the developed world, you are extremely comfortable. A teacher is even more comfortable than anybody else. Yeah. I have some friends who live in the UK, and one of their sons has come to visit us. And you go in for teaching because it pays better. People go for teaching because it pays much better, and they take the top notch.
Okay.
In our case, those are the worst paid professions.
Bottom end of the pyramid.
Bottom end of the pyramid. When you can't do anything else, you can't get anything else when you go into teaching. you teach.
It's rather an alternative,
Yes,
not a priority.
Yes. It's not a priority. And then you go even beyond that, and we go back to the so-called the pyramid. You know, the typical aristocratic, nobility-based tradition of the British, because Britain was an empire, where it was to our service. You know, the land belongs to Her Majesty, the Queen. You know, when you're working for you say, on her service, you know, on Her Highness, on Her Majesty's service.
The Queen.
On Her Majesty's service. And where basically the nobility is right at the top and everybody else goes down like that. One way to do that in a country like ours, right from the colonial period, is to deny people proper education. That's why, early enough, in the beginning of our own colonization, you're only taught sufficient skills for you to serve, to be clerks and other things, to serve the white masters, what do you call whims. We have taken that right now and internalized it and used it to disempower and permanently marginalize and reduce certain sections of the society in this country into some kind of an underclass. In the 70s, when it was very difficult for A-level classes to be established in schools, I remember there was one year, I can't remember, it was 78 or just before Kenyatta died. 78, it was it 38 or about 48 A-levels, you know, were introduced into a number of schools that were existing already. 30 of them were in Central Province. 30 of that were in Central
18
Province.
for the country.
For the rest of the country. So one way, as a school leaver one time when we went to Jogo House, because that's where education used to be, I remember the watchman at the door would talk to us and tell you, what are you doing? We're shifter. Unakuja kufanya nini hapa? Ati unasoma, and they laugh at you. And you used to be chased away from there. And that went for the rest of the country too, because there are two ministries where vernacular was spoken. Minister of Education.
Foreign Affairs.
And Minister of Foreign Affairs, you're right. Both of them were typical one community. Nancy Macharia has come back into our system right now to do exactly the same to some sections of the society. Look at what happens in Northeastern Province. We're talking about education. We're talking about the cost of education being high. We're talking about uniform. We're talking about books. There are people who don't have teachers completely. Northern Kenya, every time there's a small, what do you call, insecurity, all the teachers are removed. The children are left there. During Moi's time, towards the end of Moi's time, we used to have an affirmative action system in which the grades of entry into university for students from those areas used to be lowered. Right now, the top student in the schools in Northeastern Province cannot qualify into medicine here. Cannot qualify into medicine here because of the fact that the grades are too high, and either somebody from a national school or somebody whose children went to school around here. So what I'm trying to tell you, as it is, as much as the government has not done enough for the parents in the education sector, it still is a stratified society. It is a stratified society in which sections of the country are supposed to remain ignorant, and once you are denied knowledge, you are consigned to a permanent underclass.
Okay.
You get my point?
All right.
Now, let me come to now exactly what the government was supposed to do. There are 3 areas that the government was supposed to get involved in and make a lot of subsidize, put money into it, allow the government to pay the bigger part of the bill for in education, the health sector, and like I've said before, the security sector. There has to be an incentive to the policemen for them to do the right thing.
Okay.
Because right now, they're not doing the right things. You know, the policeman, you have to hire a policeman for a policeman to be able to do something. And you can't blame him, because a man who's supposed to be on the beat the whole night and the whole day and is supposed to risk his life, and when they die, by the way, the children and the families are not taken that well care of, he's supposed to earn a salary of 20,000, 25,000 shillings. You understand my point? And that's what he's supposed to lay his life for. So whereas all those things are there within the society, we have created an apartheid of some form in terms of the sector of education. And thanks to Nancy Macharia, she has done it. She's there as what do you call an ethnic chauvinist in her own right, and has decided to deny complete swaths of this country here the chance to have education. Okay. Secondly, the parents are suffering in the rural areas.
Okay.
Why? Because political actors in the country, decision makers in the country, in many cases, are also in the business of education. They run private schools. where students are supposed to pay hundreds of thousands of shillings every month.
Which shrinks the number in public institutions.
Every term. Now, well, look, if you're in the real estate, what do you call
business.
sector, in business, and you are doing very well, but you are a politician also because you have to make policies on that. If you're in the banking industry, if you're in the education industry, if you're in the health industry, all these things are right now. The private sector is flourishing at the cost of the public sector. Public sector is going to hell. You see what I mean?
Including hospitals, education.
Everything. Hospitals, because the politicians, decision makers, are in that business. They're in business.
Okay.
They're also in the insurance, what do you call insurance sector. So unless until such a time that, look, you go to the States and you want to become a politician, and you become a politician. You're not allowed to do business. You have to put your wealth into some kind of a blind trust. Blind trust, you know what I mean? Where people who are running it don't even know who owns this money. You get my point? And you don't know sometimes you don't even know what business your money is doing. So the point I'm trying to get at is we have become a predatory state. A predatory state, which is more or less like an organized crime, but a legal, constitutional, organized crime.
Okay.
In which the poor, have no place and no chance. So when you talk about this, I mean, look, I went to a big hospital the other day. One of my family members...
A public?
No, private hospital. One of my family members, you can't get service in public because it's overwhelmed. You get my point? And there's nothing there. If you go to the county governments right now, I'm told go to everywhere, all the counties. There's no medical. I went to a big hospital. I was charged for a CT scan. A family member had COVID, and we had to have a CT scan.
Yes.
Chest. To see the severity of how the lungs are affected. Out of 25, they will show you the severity. And if the lungs are affected beyond 17, 18, then you're caught in disaster. Then, of course, this oxygen saturation becomes very low, and the person is going to die. And I was charged 27,000 shillings for a CT scan.
Yes.
Ordinarily,
it's supposed to be 7,000.
It's supposed to be 7,000. Now, under the COVID, what do you call thing? Before that, it was much less than that. Now, you see, we have a nation where the elite, the business sector, the rich people, have decided to take advantage of the poor people to the extent which what used to cost you 10 shillings is going to cost you 30 shillings. What used to cost you 7,000 shillings is going to cost you 30,000 shillings. You get my point? It's just like the masks. The masks and the sanitizers, the early days, if you remember, a mask now costs about 10 shillings. How much they were costing that time?
In terms of procurement, more than 250, 500 shillings, 700.
Hundreds they were costing a piece. A piece. So people were making 10,000%, what do you call profits on these things. So in every sector, we have a nation where the regulatory, the consumer protection in the rest of the world, you do that in the States, you're thrown out of business, you're fined, and you go to hell. Here, nobody cares about this. No department of the government to make sure that the ordinary people are not exploited in the manner we are being exploited right now. So in every sector, because the people who are supposed to make those laws, the people who are supposed to enforce those regulations are the people who are in the business themselves. Okay,
so there's conflict of interest anytime that comes up.
Serious conflict of interest.
Okay.
So it's the state itself.
All right. In terms of
the statecraft itself.
Okay.
Turns into the kind of thing I was telling you. It's organized crime in a sense. Of course, legal, constitutional, statutory, organized crime. And
thank you so much, Wakili Philip Mwangale and Honorable Farah Maalim. On that note, as schools reopen across the country, our reporters are on ground, and there is going to be an update assessment of the same in our subsequent bulletins. Let's now shift our attention to the political developments over the weekend, and we have a couple of sound bites. Then we can couple that with the cartoon editions of the publication. But first, let's hear from the Deputy President, Dr. William Ruto, who was yesterday in Nyandarua County, and this is what he had to say.
Nimesikia watu wanasa ati kazi yao kubwa ni kujaribu kushindana na mimi. Yani hawana plan, hawana agenda, hawana mpango. Ati mpango yao yote ni kushindana na Ruto. Mimi nataka niwaambie hawa marafiki, tafadhali nawaambia kwa kuwapatia mawaidha. Tafuteni agenda. Tafuteni agenda. Tafuteni plan. Sisi tuko tayari. Sisi tuko na chama inaitwa UDA. Sisi tuko na mpango inaitwa bottom up. Sisi tuko na wananchi wamejipanga. Nyinyi kama mpango yenu ni mtu anaitwa William Ruto, mutakwama. Tafuteni sera kwanza, na mutafute chama, na mutafute candidate, ndio mukuje tushindane na nyinyi. Lakini mkizunguka zunguka vile mnazunguka, mwisho mutaenda kujiapisha pale vile ule mwingine alijiapisha siku hiyo ingine wakati tumewashinda.
That is the Deputy President, Dr. William Ruto, who yesterday spoke in Nyandarua County when he faulted the opposition for lacking strategy and rather called unto them to come up with proper policies and a candidate for 2022. This is what the Wiper Party leader, Stephen Kalonzo Musyoka, also said.
Sasa yeye akimaliza muhula wake, sasa ni juhudi yetu tukiomba Mwenyezi Mungu, na kama Wakenya tutafute tena kiongozi mwingine ambaye atashikilia pale na kuenda mbele. Tusiweze angalia nyuma tena.
Njia kusaidia uchumi na wafanyabiashara na watu wadogo ni ile msali anasema. Kwanza tuache ufisadi, tuache kuiba. Tuache kuiba. Ya pili tupunguze ushuru.
Defeating William Ruto is my #1 priority. Yes. And I have reasons for it. And I have reasons for it.
Formations are forming. And as the formations form, vile Kanina amesema, yetu tumeanza ile One Kenya Alliance, na tunakaribisha watu wote, Kanini Kega, governor, wote watu wa Central, we invite.
That is Gideon Moi, the KANU party chairperson. And one more bite from the Makadara Member of Parliament, George Aladwa, who also spoke yesterday.
Ujumbe wangu mkuu ni kwamba washikane mara moja, na kama watashikana Ruto atawashinda mchana wakiona. Tusidanganyane kwa hiyo maneno, na lazima tuwe serious. Na kuna wale ambao wanachochea kwamba Raila akue pande hile na kina Kalonzo na grupu yake na Wetangula na kina Mudavadi waende pande hii. Hao ndio watu ambao mimi nataka kukata.
Tunaelewana kabisa. Kwa hivyo sisi ni kitu kimoja. Na ndio kwa sababu tumekuja hapa na ndugu yangu kuwaambia kwamba
Yes, that is the NC Party Chief Musalia Mudavadi. And let's take a look at the cartoon edition of the People Daily by Stano. And here is the dilemma that President Uhuru Kenyatta faces in picking a successor. And the cat seems to be wondering the dilemma of picking a successor, and there are too many hands that are projected by the cartoonist as perhaps seeking the endorsement of the president, who seems ready to hand over the baton when his reign in power ends or expires in 2022 on the 9th day of August, when Kenyans will be heading to the poll to elect the next crop of leadership in the country. We also have another cartoon that I'll be picking up shortly. Wakili Philip Mwangale, looking at this and the sound bites that we have played before we had put up the cartoon on the screen, how does this present President Uhuru Kenyatta with the dilemma of who to hand over the baton to in 2022?
I think if we are calling it a dilemma, then it's only because Uhuru Kenyatta has not mentored anyone. You can't pick a successor if you have not groomed or mentored anyone.
Might he be doing that behind the scenes from the media limelight?
In the position that he occupies, it's very difficult to do that behind the scenes, because the people who are seen are the people you could actually mentor. And we are not living in a monarchical society. So if you were to pick a successor, then the successor should be the person to replace him as what they call the kingpin of Mount Kenya region, and not as a successor that would be delivered to the people in 2022. So for me, I think when we focus on the president picking somebody to take after him, we are focusing on the wrong thing, because we have individuals who meet, and I'm not talking about this, those who have spoken in those sound bites. I'm talking about other individuals who actually meet the bill. They fit the bill to lead this country. Focusing on the president picking a successor is the wrong focus in my view. But I was just hanging on Kalonzo Musyoka's statement that his #1 priority is defeating William Ruto. He speaks from a point of, I don't know why he's bitter. He knows the reason. He says he knows the reason why that is his #1 priority. But that is, it seems to be the overarching theme across board, that you have individuals who are not really interested in leading the country, who are not really interested in providing solutions for the citizens of this country, but they have some personal agenda. Kalonzo Musyoka has his own personal agenda. William Ruto has his own personal agenda that he has covered with the economic model that he's selling to citizens today. Musalia Mudavadi and the One Kenya Alliance, they have their own agenda.
Okay.
You hardly have politicians who have the interests of the country at heart.
So from this pool of politicians that we have at the moment, no one has the best interests of the country at heart?
None has. They might have people around them who do, and people who are pushing some of this rhetoric that we are seeing across the rallies they're addressing. But these individuals, you go down deep their hearts and you discover that they have some other vested interests. We have people who are looking at the clamor for power more than the clamor to end these systemic issues that we're talking about, the inequalities that we're seeing in this country, the economic morass that we are in today. These individuals do not have that agenda. Okay. And that's why we are seeing in every rally, in every funeral, they are talking about each other. It's hardly about the issues of Mwananchi. And you'd ask people across board. Most of the people who attend these rallies are doing that out of euphoria, not necessarily because these individuals really have touched their hearts.
Okay, Honorable Farah Maalim and I have previously discussed this matter in terms of what the politicians do stand for. And Honorable Farah Maalim, your party chief, has clearly demonstrated that his overwhelming political priority is to defeat the Deputy President, William Ruto. Will be coming to Musalia Mudavadi, Gideon Moi, and the DP, William Ruto, in a short while. But is that the party position that you deputize because he's your party chief?
Well, you know, maybe I should share something with you here now. Kalonzo is somebody who has a powerful streak or dose of humanity in himself. And he sees William Ruto as an architect of a doomsday in this country. As far as Kalonzo is concerned, the reason why he says, I have my reasons for doing that, he repeated it to me many times. He says, Ruto wants to start a class war here. A class war, which essentially is going to be akin to the French Revolution. You see what I mean? Among the things right now, one of the reasons why the youth are madly, euphoric about him, is that he promises to restore what was not restored after the Mau Mau struggle.
That was post-independence.
Yes. So in other words, he's trying to say that your property was taken by the people who are around Kenyatta 1 at that time, and I'm going to restore those properties to you, and the land and everything else. Now that is a very, very bad way of trying to access power. You see what I mean? Kalonzo is not a rich man. He's a very simple man. But like me and you and many other Kenyans and Wangale here, we believe in the right to private property. We believe in the need for people to work for their own success. We don't believe in saying, I'll take it from so and so and give it to you. So you start a class war in here, it's going to become like the French Revolution, and the very architects of the French Revolution were all consumed by the revolution itself. They were all also guillotined, killed. The same ones who deposed the king and made sure that the king himself was guillotined were also guillotined. So when he says that, probably he believes that he's going to survive that himself, but the reality is that you're not going to survive that. You get my point? Because you see the haves and the have-nots, the definition of the haves and the have-nots. There are many people who are your neighbors right now who see you as a have. Probably all you have is a small salary from Ebru here. You know what I mean? That barely makes you go, gets you along. But somebody does not have that. So the first person is going to come and approach to try and rob from and kill and maim is people like you. It's not just going to be confined to the people up there. So that is one of the very powerful reasons that Kalonzo himself sees a doomsday kind of prophecy in the presidency of William Ruto. But having said that, you know, this is such a gullible society. We are some of the best educated, best informed societies in sub-Saharan Africa. I would say the whole of Africa, including the north. but extremely gullible. The same William Ruto used to say that we'll grow this economy by double digit without giving a concrete plan for that, without giving the justification and saying we'll develop this sector, we'll develop that sector, we will do A, B, C, D. This is going to bring so much into the economy. This is going to bring so much. And at the end of the day, I'm aiming for 11%, 12%, 13% what you call growth. And in 10 years' time, we're going to double our economy. We'll have a double GDP. But just going out there and saying we shall grow the economy by double digit, not giving any concrete what do you call a plan for that. And that's exactly what's going on right now. Now, because he sees the possibility of capturing the central Kenya through that kind of a euphoria of the wheelbarrow and basically say bottom up, which means we're going to redistribute land. It's a similar one to that.
So it's a plan to, or narrative to attain power?
It's absolutely just a narrative to attain power, and he has no interest beyond that. And because I know it myself. I mean, this is a young man who came, when I was the first one came into parliament, he was just barely out of the university that time with YK92. His whole history, his whole wealth, his whole, what do you call, construction is based on things that nobody would be happy with. And here you are trying to reinvent yourself and repackage yourself. And you see, it's so bad that people can easily repackage themselves like that and still become, many people in the society, very well educated, are so gullible, will fall for that.
Okay.
But the point I'm trying to tell you is this. This country must be able to turn a page in which I don't mind myself, a situation in which William Ruto, Kalonzo Musyoka, Raila Odinga, Mudavadi, all the presidential candidates we have in the country today are brought out there and told, give us your plan for the country. Give us your plan for the country. And be there for 3-4 hours, like the debates that they have in the States and other places. And you're not looking at basically sensational and, you know, the kind of stuff and the manner in which somebody laughs or does this thing. People are looking at concrete steps and see how workable those steps are, how actionable those steps are. You'll be surprised. You'll be surprised some of these people who are shouting loud right now, saying bottom up and everything else, hustler, wheelbarrow, and the rest of it have absolutely nothing.
Okay.
Other than the presumption that Uhuru is going to be thrown into jail.
Okay.
And many other people who are also in the system are going to be thrown into jail. And the land that belongs to very rich people is going to be redistributed to other people. That is a wrong entry into the politics of this country 60 years after independence.
Okay. Now, given what you have submitted at the moment, you this morning on another television station said that in the event Raila Odinga and William Ruto contest the presidency, William Ruto will win. And you made it clear that you would not...
If just the two of them.
Yes, and you made it clear that you would not vote for William Ruto.
Absolutely. I wouldn't vote for
but you added that he's going to win. Yes. So which now brings me to the point of the One Kenya Alliance. Your party leader, Musalia Mudavadi, Ford Kenya Party Chief, Moses Wetangula, and Gideon Moi, the KANU Party Chairperson, have hinted at a possible political alliance. Is then that alliance, which according to many political observers is unlikely to materialize. So then what is the way out what is the political formula for defeating the deputy president as your party leader has said?
Let me tell you, under the current circumstances, it's impossible, whatever the formula is going to be, for somebody to win on the first round. There's no question about that.
So we are looking at a rerun?
We're looking at a rerun. Now, let me tell you about the rerun also. Today, the manner in which politics has been transacted has a lot to do with the psychology of the different ethnic, regional groups in the country. For many, many years, from the 60s, everybody from the mountain region who was in a position of prominence in terms of politics has vilified the Jaramogi family, Oginga Odinga family. Oginga Odinga himself was vilified. He was the doyen of opposition politics in the country, and he's credited with ushering in the multi-party democracy of 1992, when Section 2A was repealed. But look at what happened immediately. The parties were allowed to open up. But parties were allowed to be registered now.
We had a whole host of political parties.
The people who were with him left him. Matiba left him. Kibaki jumped ship from KANU
to DP.
And Jaramogi, with all the support he had in the country prior to that, ended up becoming number 4 in that election. 1997, the second election to that, when his son ran for elections, he got less than 700,000 votes. He basically got the Luo votes. Yeah. Beyond that, he had nothing. NDP. When you have the Jaramogi family or somebody from the lake side, it's very easy for the entire mountain region to be convinced these guys are coming to take our wealth. A narrative has been built, a psychological construct has been built that Luos are not hardworking, they only have a passion for enjoyment. You get my point? They would want to put on the best suits and drive the best cars, and they will do it by taking it away from you because they have not worked for it. Okay. They will not work for it.
So which a narrative which according to you has been instilled?
It's been there, it's been played out for quite a while.
Okay.
But it has taken root. It has taken solid roots. You get my point? I mean, I come from a community that are not, basically would do very poorly in farming. The fact that the Luos are not good farmers does not necessarily mean that they cannot work hard. But somehow, because this was an agricultural country, you get my point, that seems to have taken hold. And these were not people who were exposed to agriculture in the manner in which the mountain region was exposed to. Now, then Uhuru and the other people who were there, including Kibaki's time and everybody, again, oversold that narrative. Mark my words. Today, when you come with RUTO, as Kenyatta, the same man who was saying the other day, this man is coming to take your hard-earned wealth and turn it into their own enjoyment, you know what I mean? Into their holidays. He's now telling them, I'm having a handshake with him, and he's given the impression that he's trying to support.
Which is, again, proven to be difficult, isn't it, in central Kenya?
Now, central Kenya now says, if that's the case,
okay,
we will opt for your worst nightmare. Let me just give you one incident that I related this morning.
Okay.
Incident. When a pact was negotiated between Mudavadi and Uhuru and RUTO
in 2013,
with Kibaki's deep state kind of a support there in 2013, that morning I came to Parliament myself. And I met the die-hard Uhuru supporters. Rachel Shabesh, Amin Abdallah was very, very centerpiece actually. Amin Abdallah, the former governor of Kiambu, what is his name?
That's Waititu.
No, the one before him.
And Kafogo.
Kabogo, Waititu, all this, Beth Mugo, all those die-hard supporters of Uhuru. Basically, Uhuru had quite a bit of a following that came back all the way from when Moi had anointed him as his successor, and he lost. So they were within that. They came out there and said, look, if Uhuru is not going to stand for these elections, we will support Raila Odinga.
Okay, that was...
In other words, he's saying that you don't want to run and you're trying to bring us somebody else, we're going to do your worst nightmare, we're going to go and support. It's like a son telling you, if I don't get what I want from me, I'm going to commit suicide. It's not that he loves suicide. Suicide is not a place people run to. But you're trying to tell people...
It's a way out.
It's a way out.
Okay.
So what I'm seeing, what is happening right now in the mountain region is a way of telling exactly what they told Uhuru those days at Kibaki.
That we are going for your worst nightmare.
We are going for your worst nightmare. But that is now being wrongly and erroneously translated and interpreted as a support that RUTO has
in the mountain region.
That is not there. That will disappear. And you watch it. And I gave an analogy this morning. Watch it. It will disappear and disappear like in thin air.
Evaporation. Wakili Mwangale, I'm sure you want to also come into the discussion. But given what's happening at the moment, then you have the central Kenya region, the House of Mumbai, politically, if you may like it, appears to be uncertain as to which political direction or political path to pursue. And all these political members are jostling for the president's endorsement, who seem to be a bit distant in terms of who he had to publicly declare his support for as we head into 2022. So how will all this political puzzle play out 11 months to the polls?
First, I must begin by mentioning that I am very uncomfortable that when it gets to every election time, the direction that the country is heading is always pegged around Mount Kenya. It has happened for a very long time. It should not necessarily happen because, it's not the only region in this country. But we somehow seem to gravitate around the decision that will come from that region. That's it. To the question
it's
that,
vote rich, that's why.
But we have
other areas that
yes,
equally vote rich. Western Kenya is one. Go ahead.
Yeah, but to the question that you've asked, there is no leader from Mount Kenya that has built a national profile to this level, to this stage that we're talking today. A leader who has built a national profile who would not need the endorsement of any other person. You'd hardly, I mean, the people who seem to be on the forefront can only get the support of certain quarters. And that's why you're seeing divisions, some saying Mount Kenya West, Mount Kenya East, South, and whatnot. Because you have leaders who have concentrated on building their profile around those small regions. You hardly find a leader with the profile of what Uhuru was in 2013, for example, or even 2007. Or
served as the Deputy Prime Minister.
Yes,
Finance
you have not seen that kind of profile. And I think that's why there is this kind of jostling. Number two, and again, this goes back to how the president has carried out his leadership. There was a lot of stamping of heads. You'd come up and try and offer a critique or say something that appears to be against what the government of the day had decided to go with, and you are clobbered on the head. So people who are trying to rise, people who are trying to claim their voices out of that cocoon of Mount Kenya were clobbered. Some of them have not recovered to date. So I think that is a reason for the jostling. When we're talking about these political formations, you've heard Gideon Moi saying the formations are coming up. The only chance that that alliance that they're calling the One Kenya Alliance would have is if they sidelined Raila Odinga. Because if they have Raila Odinga on board One Kenya Alliance, then they do not stand a chance. They do not stand a chance completely because these individuals who are on the forefront of, when I mentioned about Kalonzo Musyoka, I'd forgotten that Honorable Maalim is
his deputy.
Yeah, but these individuals, they do not have the national muscle to actually, rally a large part of this country behind them. Whether it is because of their personalities, whether it is because they are not so aggressive, that is up to them. But they do not have the national muscle. They do not have the national profile. Musalia Mudavadi cannot go around the country alone. He would address just 5 people. And those few people would come to hear him would be coming out of curiosity. The same to Gideon Moi. They cannot rally as much support, whether by euphoria, whether by ideology and policy.
So they need Odinga on board?
They need somebody else.
Okay.
But if they take on Raila Odinga, then they lose Mount Kenya votes.
Okay, which means then in that likely possibility, we have a 3-horse race. You have the DP's camp, Odinga, who according to you might go alone, and Gideon, Mudavadi, Weta, and Stephen Kalonzo Musyoka. If that is to be the case in August 2022, then according to many political observers, we are likely to go for a rerun.
Yes, I agree.
So who do you think then from that lineup of political establishment is likely to scoop the presidency? Owing to, of course, how regional politics is going to be playing out.
Let me give you the reason before I give you the person. Okay. And the reason is this, that you have one quarter that is used to thinking strategically. And you have one quarter that seems to have very lofty plans, very lofty idea, but strategy appears to be lacking. And that is a side that has the One Kenya Alliance, you'd call them principles, because they appear to have very lofty plans. But when it comes to strategic thinking, somehow the people they bring on board do not appear to have that fiber within them. If you contrast that with William Ruto and give it to him, he's a political strategic thinker, the methods notwithstanding. He has some strategy behind the things that he does. So if they were to go in that manner, the 3 factions, then William Ruto will carry the day in the first round of election.
Okay, Honorable Farah Maalim.
I can tell you one thing.
Yes.
I will disagree very much with somebody whose uncle I've been close friends with. You're looking for the president of this country come 2022? Look no further than two people. Kalonzo Musyoka and Mudavadi.
So from One Kenya Alliance?
From One Kenya Alliance.
How will be the arithmetic?
I'll tell you how the arithmetic
I want the arithmetic.
I'm going to tell you how the arithmetic is going to be. I told you from the beginning that the mountain is showing its displeasure with the president.
Basically the handshake.
Translation of handshake. And that's the reason why they are saying we're going to what your worst nightmare. You take that away and have another face in there. Just watch. In the next couple of weeks, both Mudavadi and Kalonzo will be basically stomping the country, and they will be stomping Mount Kenya. And watch how the euphoria is going to be. People now have an alternative. They don't have to go for RUTO. They don't have to go for Raila, who has been vilified by Uhuru and many others for ages. And that is where Kenya is going now. I'll explain to you why. Look, I remember there was an election in Mali.
Just recently.
Not the latest one. Not the latest one, in which the president had to leave, and he had done his 10 years, I think, or something like that. Before he became in the first round he had 17%. There's a friend of mine who had met actually outside myself in the country because of those progressive politics in the continent, multipartyism, and all that euphoria. We used to try and do a bit of networking. A number of other forces in sub-Saharan Africa, Southern Africa, West Africa. I met Celine. It's called Celine. A Fulani, by the way, and from Mali, yeah? And he got 46% of the votes in the first round.
The presidential day.
In the presidential elections. The person who was next to him was only 17%. I don't know if you remember that. The presumption is that this guy who's 46% will have no problem getting an alliance that is just going to give him,
5%.
Actually, less than 5%.
5%.
Less than 5%. It was 46.something%. You know what? Everybody went to the one with the 17%, including 1% from his own 46%.
So he
ended up with
45%.
And the president was somebody who had in the first round this much. Why politics is people, a small section of the population have a euphoric following of an individual for whatever, for regional purposes, for ethnicity purposes, for faith purposes, for whatever it is. That one now will be with him wherever he goes. Like Raila will always carry the Luo community wherever he goes. You get my point? Yeah. But then the majority of the people are going to come from the rest of the country in two ways. People who are satisfied and appreciate your policies on balance and trust you. And people who are so scared of the alternative, they have no choice but to run to you. You get my point? So in this country, the scarecrow that both Raila and RUTO invoke is so powerful that given an alternative, many people will troop to that alternative. Not because that person is so charismatic. He's so, look at, what's his name?
Mudavadi.
No. Gideon. No. Look at Kibaki. Kibaki was very far from being a charismatic politician. Kibaki was very far from being seen as a strong politician.
Conservative politician.
He was seen as a fence sitter. Actually, the Kikuyu used to call him General Kaboya. Was it Kaboya, whatever?
A calm demeanor.
Kind
of a person.
Very calm demeanor, fence sitter, somebody who does not stock what they call controversy here and there. But basically, people went to him because everybody, even after Raila had said Kibaki Tosha, the majority of the people in the country were saying, we are looking for some safe hands. And they were seeing that same hands in this old sage, who has a history of being non-confrontational. Very nice. And I always credit his 10 years as being some of the best 10 years this country has ever had. He was not elected because all these people supported him. No. People who supported other people came to him. Now, both Kalonzo and Mudavadi strike you as safe hands.
Okay, let me just this phone call. You will continue.
Okay.
And we have a caller who is now on the line. Good afternoon.
Habari yako?
Niko salama, habari ya leo?
Mzuri sana mtangazaji, unafanya mzuri.
Tafadhali changia mada ya leo.
Sasa mimi nataka kuchangia hivi. Nauliza Fara Maalim huyo. Najua hii dunia ambayo si tunaishi ni ya Mwenyezi Mungu. Na Mungu anasema watu tupendane wenyewe kwa wenyewe. Lakini ile siasa ambayo nyinyi mnafanya katika taifa letu ile ya Kenya, si siasa ya kuridhisha. Kwa sababu mnasema mnaleta vitu inaitwa BBI ya kuunganisha Wakenya wawe kitu kimoja, lakini mmechukuana kikundi fulani kupiga mtu mmoja tu peke yake vita. Nauliza Fara Maalim, kwa boma yako Ulubaro hakuna ambaye ilijenga nyumba yako ikipima mchanga na mawe? Sasa hiyo inamaanisha mnadhalilisha sisi wauza Ulubaro, sisi wenye kubebea samadi Ulubaro, tukienda kujengea nini? Kujengea nyumba. Huyu Ruto ni ndugu yenu. Mudavadi ni ndugu yenu. Wote ni wa Kenya. Ile maneno nilikuwa nasikia Musyoka naongea huyu. Musyoka sasa stahili kuwa rais wa nchi ya Kenya. Kwa sababu yale maneno ambayo inatoka kwake si ya kujenga nchi. Na ikiwa nchi inaporomoka, mbona tusikuje pamoja? Biblia inatuambia njooni tusemezane. Dhambi zijapokuwa nyekundu kama damu zisafishwe ziwe nyeupe kama theluji.
Okay.
Fara Maalim, nimesikia ukisema hautapigia Ruto. Na sisi wenye tunasorora mambo yale mnafanya Ruto, tutapigia Ruto kura na atakuwa rais wa nchi ya Kenya wa 3.
Okay.
Sasa mimi nauliza, mnapoenda kwa mikutano yenu ni Ruto. Si hatukuni Ruto. Sisi tunataka maendeleo. Njaa inaua watu. Corona inamaliza watu na wanakufa, na mnasema mnataka madaraka. Mtakuwa mnaongoza wakina nani? Mbele ya Mwenyezi Mungu hamfanye vizuri. Asante.
Asante sana. Thank you so much for your contributions. She largely had repeated the same question I earlier posed of the overwhelming priority of your party leader Kalonzo Musyoka, who said that my main political priority is to defeat the Deputy President William Ruto. But she has emphasized on one key point, which is political reconciliation, and the reason as to why political players apparently are not coalescing around a unity cause and champion what impacts the lives of the Wananchi positively. So you had a point to finish up, and I go to Akili Mongale.
Yeah.
So basically, you were you had
see, what I'm underscoring is she's right to have her own choices. I have my reasons for and I've said it many times. And we want. Look, we have been treated for far too long to euphoria. Expectations that are misplaced. Somebody comes up with a small area, this is this economy, and then people don't even look back at the history. I had the opportunity to chair sessions of the parliament where there was a censure motion against William Ruto. I had an opportunity to chair.
When he was the agriculture minister.
Yes, I had an opportunity to chair when there were issues that were adversely mentioned in the Prime Minister of those days, Raila Odinga. Some people like us have been around for far too long. And there are too many things that have happened during our time. And when we take a decision, it's because of a very considered considerations. You see what I mean? And that's why we are able now to say it openly out there. Look, this country is full of people who are easily gullible, people who can easily be cheated. One of the biggest problems we have right now as a country is that our economy is still reeling.
From the effects of the pandemic?
No, it is still reeling from the effects of the golden bug. That's when the rain started beating us. That's when this country went to hell, as far as our economy is concerned. We've never recovered fully from that. I can assure you, we've never recovered fully from that. When billions and billions of shillings were being cutted away. And the alpha and omega of those things was what was called YK92. I was watching the other day somebody in Japan who was sacked from a very senior position because of a statement that person made when was it a he or a she, a student, many years back.
Over 30 years.
Over 30 years back. People say, but you had this conviction those days. It's wrong for you to occupy this position because that is not right for this country.
So he had to be ejected.
He had to be ejected. Here are people who are running this country and stealing it left, right, and center and putting us into the place where we are. And you still billions and billions and hundreds of billions out of the country, and then you buy me a maize crop up there, you give me 100,000 shillings, and you expect to forget all that, and you know, it's an extremely gullible society where even the middle class, even the brilliant, what they call professionals themselves, all you need to do is to give them a small contract, and that's it, as long as their own interest is taken care of.
Right.
So this country needs to go back to the history of everybody.
So according to you, the lifeline and the salvageable bone is the One Kenya Alliance?
Well, I think it is an option. I'm not saying, look, you can never put a finality into anything and say this is the only solution. No. I mean, and as a scholar, or as anybody who believes in logic and rationale and everything else, and knowledge is also, and convictions are there. It's a growing thing. We're living what they call human organics, you know, living organics and organisms, and basically we, you know, you never know. I mean, you have a good idea, sit down, we'll talk about it and see which is better than the other. But as far as I'm concerned, right now, given the history of this country, given the history of this country, I have a feeling that that is one way we can try and heal this country and bring it closer together.
Okay.
You don't want to divide this country.
All right.
There are people who invoke very powerful, divisive passions. One of the things that scares the hell out of me when it comes to Deputy President William RUTO, is when I see him make all the kind of visits he makes to Uganda, to Museveni, you know what I mean?
All right, he was recently there.
He's more or less seen as the mentor, you know what I mean?
Okay.
And what Museveni did to democracy in that country.
Okay.
I had no problem with him fighting to, you know, to liberate the country from the dictatorship, the military dictatorship was there. We just have a civilian dictatorship even now.
Okay, and what the opposition in Uganda now calls a lifetime presidency and NRM.
Absolutely.
Now, Wakili Philip Wangara, to finish up, and just on this note, because it's very important, we talked about the president's succession plan, whether he's going to be a Kibaki, perhaps, who had stayed away from having an active role in how he wanted to mold his 2013 success after he left power, and also maybe he would epitomize his political godfather, the late Daniel Toroitich Arap Moi. But all this happening at this time, and him saying that at some point in 2018 that my candidate for 2022 will shock you. What do you think might be driving the deputy president and the president apart? Are they reconcilable?
I think they are reconcilable, but I may not know. You know, when this tiff between them began, I actually thought I knew what their squabbles were about. But along the way, as the rift has continued expanding, it is not really clear what the argument is about. When it comes, there are those who have said it was because RUTO was looting the government dry, but it seems like the president was comfortable with that scenario if that was the case.
For the first time?
Then he was comfortable with the looting in the first term. I don't know why he changed his mind then, but they are reconcilable. The only issue is that you have pride on both ends. None is willing to admit whatever wrong they have done. That said, it seems as though every election cycle, Kenyans are pushed to the corner so that we are left with an option of accepting the lesser evil. So we have a group of people who have been involved, and it's true, as Honorable Mali mentioned, that you have individuals who are occupying the current political space who have contributed to where we are as a country. They have contributed to the theft, the looting, the grabbing, everything, you can mention it, that has happened over the last few decades in this country. But they occupy certain political spaces, and when we get to every general election, we are presented with these individuals, and we sort of have the option of just choosing who will not loot us drier, because all of them can loot us dry.
Who is the better of the evil?
Yeah, who is the lesser evil?
Lesser evil.
And that is a very unfortunate place to find ourselves in. Okay. I sympathize with the caller. We didn't get the name, but I sympathize with Kenyans who will elect an individual just because they have some kind of sympathy for that individual. I mean, if you are going to elect William RUTO just because you sympathize with the things that you consider done against him, then you are contributing to setting this country on a wrong path. if you're going to elect Raila Odinga, just because you think that he has suffered some things in the past, then you're also contributing to setting this country on the wrong path. I wish we would, read beyond this political rhetoric that we see in funerals and rallies.
Okay.
If we and we have the ability to do that. It's just that we choose to go with euphoria, as Honorable Malim has mentioned. So if we are going to make decisions based on sympathy, then we are going to be carrying out a universal suffrage by gambling or by betting.
Okay, all that as we monitor the political developments in the country. And I thank you so much, Honorable Fana Malim, the former Deputy Speaker of the National Assembly and the Wiper Party Deputy Party Leader. Thank you so much. And equally to Philip Wakili Mwangale, who had joined us here. He's an advocate of the High Court and socio-political commentator here in the country. And I'll be back in about 15 minutes time for the lunchtime news. And we'll see you then as I see off my EBU panel here on set. Bye-bye.